go, we're breaking all the limits, stepping up the game, no one ever gonna finish. Hit the streets, left cities on fire, every moment we live, it's a heart's desire. Dreams in the real view, future's looking bright, living for the hustle, shining through the night. Feel the beat drop, it's a rhythm in our soul, with every step we take, we're closer to our goal.
Okay, well, we are back on the second episode because I rebranded recently of Warrior Vetrepreneur podcast. I did a live stream this morning, and I'm gonna do my second one here with Keith Cassant. Again, this is brought to you by Victory Leadership Coaching, and the goal of this podcast, the Warrior Vetrepreneur podcast, is to inspire veterans to go out there and not lose their identity, but to achieve their goals and find and reestablish their identity, and remember that your identity was not the military. Your identity is you, and you accomplished all that stuff there because you did it, not because the military helped you do it.
I love
all
that.
Right. Thanks, Keith. So, Keith, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm living the dream, brother. How you doing?
Well, living the dream. It's not like we used to say in the military, pinch me and wake me up. But
yeah, and nightmares are dreams too. But yeah,
nightmares are dreams too. No, but I appreciate you coming on here. This is an interesting opportunity to talk to somebody. I won't speak with the specific agency, but I know you help people.
Sure,
you'll help educate people on federal employment. You help them with a whole bunch of stuff, and you and Sean host one of my favorite veteran podcasts out there. So please, if you wouldn't mind, go into a little bit of your background and tell us about kind of what you're doing and how you help.
Yeah. So background, 22 years and some change in the Army, retired 5 years ago, and that transition was absolutely terrifying. So we'll just start saying that. So I enlisted at the age of 17. So when I retired 22 years later at 39, I had never been an adult civilian a single day of my life. So thought I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up coming out. Actually, I did know what I wanted to be, but then it was going to go law enforcement and all that to say, but medically got disqualified for that because I was also doing all the VA claim stuff. And so that basket shattered and I had all my eggs in it. So I was left trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up all over again, knowing I couldn't go do the initial thing I wanted to go do. So leveraged every resource, every mentor, anything or anyone I could get my grubby little hands on to try to, make this work. Had to put food on the table and all that kind of good stuff. So leveraged a ton of nonprofits, found a bunch of mentors. So when I did, quote unquote, land on my feet on the other side, I just had a desire to give back to the community. I was like, there's no way I can't give back to this community that just gave so much to me in the 9-ish months that I leveraged the heck out of it. So,
right.
So that kind of started my personal journey. My job wasn't what I do now. Initially, I wasn't getting paid. I was actually working at Wells Fargo initially. But on the side as a volunteer, I called myself a freelance mentor. And I just started helping people. Anybody who was willing to talk to me, I was willing to talk back to them and share what I could and help them in any way that I could. So fast forward 4 years, a few other jobs later, I'm working at a federal agency, and the opportunity to become that agency's veterans program manager opens up. And at this point, I've been doing it for 4 years as a freelance guy. Why not get paid to do it, kind of thing? I've literally landed my dream job. I love what I do. What I do for the agency is much beyond just the mentorship piece, but whenever you're talking to a veteran, there's always something to be shared, mentorship wise, whether it's pivoting into a different industry like the one I work in, which is mostly cybersecurity, or, the federal government. We have our own resume mystical thing, which it's not that mystical. I tend to debunk that myth a lot with folks, but yeah, just being able to help the veteran community and in the ways that I'm able to now, I love what I do.
Well, that's good. They say if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And so
I hate that phrase. I hate it.
You hate it?
Because that suggests there's something called the perfect job, and there's not.
No.
There's no such thing as the perfect job. You can have your dream job, but you're still going to have bad days. So so that's why I hate the phrase. I get the sentiment of it, but I'm like, no, the dream job exists. Perfect job does not. So.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's true. I have my own business outside of doing this podcast, and it's definitely work. And there's, though I enjoy
Yeah.
performing my duties, as a leadership and mindset coach,
Mhm.
I definitely don't enjoy some of the work that goes into the back office for a
Yeah,
bit.
exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's natural. So I
Yeah.
understand where you're coming from. No,
Yep.
but you also have a podcast I mentioned with Sean, VET
Yeah.
S.O.S,
Yep.
which you've inspired me because I didn't know it when I was getting ready to go to be a guest on your podcast. But afterwards, I remember when I signed up that it said something about a t-shirt, but then I got a little goodie bag with a coin and a patch
Yes,
and
sir.
all kinds of stuff. Man, you've inspired me. I'm going to be making some coins here pretty soon, and I'm going to be sending that out to all my guests. So don't be surprised if after I make that, you end up getting asked
Yeah.
for an address. But no, tell me about that podcast. I mean, gosh, you've had awesome guests on there. You
Yeah.
guys inspired me to reach out to Jack Tilley, which he hasn't come on mine yet, but it's
Okay.
because I watched yours and I'm like, why am I sitting here at the bottom
Yep.
feeding on nothing when I could be having some amazing people as
All
guests
right.
on my podcast? But no, tell
Yeah.
me about your mission with that and kind of where it's at now and where you'd like to take it to if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I just want to tease real quick. We are in talks with Grinston as well. Tony
Say
Grinston
that again.
is Tony Grinston. We're in talks with him to get him on the
Oh,
podcast here soon as well. So speaking of
okay.
sergeants major of the Army, but yeah. So I just have to say first and foremost, it's Sean's podcast, right? I have the distinct pleasure and honor to be the co-host, the guest, whatever guest host. But yeah, because even prior to me, he was working with Eric Brew, and it's always been, to me, it's always been Sean's podcast. That man has put in so much time and effort and energy into that podcast. And so when he reached out to me, because Eric was moving on to other endeavors and had to step down as one of the co-hosts, I was flabbergasted, first of all, but completely honored and humbled. Like just the fact that he would consider asking me to come on, because yeah, this podcast, I'm just as much of a fan as I am a co-host of that
Right.
show. The guests he finds, because he does a lot. I feel bad. I'm like, dude, I feel like I don't do enough for the podcast. I just show up and talk, and be the ugly mug on the other part of the screen. But no, it's like I said, when he asked me, I was like, holy cow, because yeah, this podcast is amazing. I mean, some of the guests that we've been blessed in that are willing to come on, and it's always transition related, right? The VET S.O.S brand is even branching out now. We've got I guess you could say a spinoff, for lack of a better term, for entrepreneurs, podcast for entrepreneurs. We got a podcast for based on education. But yeah, the core, the original VET S.O.S podcast, it's solely based on transition. And even if you've transitioned out, I would argue we're always in a transition phase of
Yes.
some kind.
Yes.
So you name it, we've hit almost every single topic. I shouldn't even say, oh, well, I will say almost, because there's another topic we might be broaching here in the near future on the medical side of the house that we haven't previously breached on the podcast. But yeah, I mean, mental well-being and job and employment, and there's no shortage of. So I've always called it the sea of goodwill, right? And there's no shortage of resources out there for veterans. In fact, it's overwhelming.
Oh yeah.
Right? I've seen numbers anywhere from 44 to 47,000, but somewhere in the 40,000 range is the number of nonprofits just registered with the IRS for veterans. For veterans, that's you can't navigate that. So VET S.O.S podcast is designed to help the service members, the veterans, the military spouses, even everybody in the military community to navigate this sea. In fact, that's the tagline, right? Don't drown in the sea of transition. Grab the VET S.O.S lifeline. So we're there to help you sort out some of these organizations, because they're not all created equal and they all have their own niches, right? I might go to Hire Heroes USA for one thing, and I'm going to go to American Corporate Partners for another, and I'm going to go support Pancakes for Roger on in another way. So yeah, all these different areas that are just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. That's what I found. And everyone talks about their transition journey, and I'll ask if you wouldn't mind yours in a minute, but you know, when I got out of the military, man, it was hard. I'm not gonna
Mhm.
lie. It was very, very hard. And I did feel like I had a bit of identity crisis. I think we all do, because you know, we man, I was a warrant officer, so I had everybody coming to me, and I was important to every operation that we had to plan and execute when it came to troops going somewhere or their equipment going somewhere. And it when I left and I started applying for jobs, it was like the people don't just they're not subject matter experts in all modes of transportation. People just don't do that. And so when I
Yeah.
would tell them, I would get funny looks during my interviews and stuff like that. And I didn't get hired for anything. And I had to change my approach. And you know, I wouldn't have known how to do that if I wouldn't have leveraged, you know, the DAV. There were people in that community, the VA, eh, it's the VA. They
Sure.
have they have resources, but I'm
Yep.
not going to knock them. But I definitely can't say that they're the best resource all the time.
Yeah.
But you know, just knowing that there are so many things out there, and if I wouldn't have been referred by people that had already been out for a while, I would have been lost.
Yeah.
And so, thank you
Yeah.
for doing that with VET S.O.S. And by the way, I'm sure that does nothing but benefit you in your role with the government, helping people navigate uh, federal employment
Yeah.
as well, because that you said it, that's a whole different animal in itself. And then there's the resume that they want you to write an entire book and submit. But that's
Yeah.
yeah. But if you wouldn't mind, Keith, could you share a little bit a little bit about your transition and how you got to do what you're doing?
Sure. And I love what you talked about. I love this concept of you don't have to lose your identity. So I'm even going to kind of put my take on that or my spin on that, as it applies to my journey. So real quick, since you mentioned it, I'll throw out just my first, no more than 5 pages, federal resumes. Okay.
Yeah,
The
that's
days of
true.
20-page
Yes.
resumes are gone. No more than 5. I'll just throw it out there. If you need more, hit me up on LinkedIn. We'll schedule a call. But happy to help you navigate that, all the ins and outs of that. And it's really not as bad as they make it seem. I'll dumb it down for everybody.
Okay.
I'm a dumb army guy, so I had to break it down so I could digest it myself. So
Claim or
um,
mine, front facing enemy.
exactly. So yeah, so my transition, like I said, it was scary. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I finally made a decision because I was all over the map, kind of like you, right? You said it. Military makes us jacks of all trades, and the private sector or anywhere outside of the military, they don't hire jacks of all trades, right? They have specific needs that need to be, filled, specific positions with specific people with specific skills, everything's specific, right? Which we have those skills, but we're so adept and used to just saying, "Hey, tell me what to do. I'll go make it happen." I was a senior NCO, so yeah, like that was our job. You tell us what to do, as long as it's lawful, we're gonna go make it happen. You
That's
know,
right.
if we need to, we'll enlist the E4 mafia, and they'll go steal some equipment for us. Whatever's gonna happen, we'll look the other way. But anyway, so all that to say, you know, we get out and the private world, the private sector, the civilian sector, whatever you want to call it, doesn't quite work like that, right? So it's hard to like, oh my gosh, what is my identity and all that? And for me personally, I can't speak to everybody. I can only share my own experiences and all this. But for me personally, therein lies where that freelance mentoring came in. That helped me keep my identity. I was working at Wells Fargo as a branch manager initially, and loved the company, but the job was killing me. I'm an empath to the extreme, and nobody wants to talk to the branch manager when they're in a good mood. And so I dealt with negativity for a living, basically, and it was killing me. And again, I will actually sing Wells Fargo's praises. They truly, as a company, they value veterans. They really do. They give the actual veterans preference, which a lot of companies say they do and they don't. So not knocking the company. It's just the nature of the work, right? It's customer service facing, and you deal with customers. And as a branch manager, tend to deal with the negative ones mostly. Um, so that the freelance mentoring not only helped me keep my sense of identity because I was giving back to the military community, but it also kept me sane in some ways, right? I had a release despite the day in and day out that I was dealing with work. But even at Wells Fargo, I was involved in the veteran based special interest groups, whatever you want to. The word DEI is kind of going away now, or at least in the federal sector it is. But all that to say, just those but there's always veteran affinity groups, if you want to call them that. And Wells Fargo had them, right? And so I got very involved with those. So, even if I were to push aside the freelance mentorship, in my organization, finding my tribe, in Wells Fargo, I found the tribe. I got involved in the veteran programs and networks there. We even had some in-person mixer kind of events kind of thing, So then moving on, I always had a heart to get back in the federal government. So after Wells Fargo is when I landed my first federal job. And once you get back in the federal government, I mean, my first federal job was actually with the Coast Guard. So you don't get much more military than that without going into the DoD. So I immediately was just clicking back with everybody, right? But all that to say, everything, looking back on it, everything that happened in my journey was all because of my tribe, all because of that identity that I didn't lose, right? I kept seeking out fellow veterans. And, statistics, we hear it all the time in TAP, Soldier for Life, whatever transition program was, whatever it was called when you came out, but networking, right? What is it? Well, I've seen a range. So I say about 3 out of 4 jobs, 3 out of every 4 jobs are attained through networking. That is so huge, and vets love helping vets, and so I'm living proof of that. I've had 5 jobs in total since I retired from the Army. 4 out of my 5 jobs I got through networking. Right. That Wells Fargo was one. He's the only one that I didn't network my way into. And that was because it was an apprenticeship where you really couldn't. It was designed to get somebody off the street who didn't know anybody else in the company. They were going to teach you banking from the ground up, and they hired me for my leadership skills.
Okay.
So yeah, all that to say, the other 4 jobs, I knew somebody either on the inside or who recently was on the inside and still had a connection to the inside. Right. And they all came from the military community. 2 of the 4 people I networked with, old Army buddies, guys I served with in uniform that had already been a part of my tribe. They knew who I was. And that's another thing we don't tend to throw out there during transition is we grill into these service members, ABN, always be networking, which is true, but don't neglect the network you already have, the folks you serve with alongside in uniform, right? If you're like me, anytime you've gotten a new one of these things in the last 15, 20 years, the old contacts roll over to the new phone, right? So you have hundreds of people probably in this thing. A lot of them got out of the military before you, or since you've gone out, if you're already out. Where are they at? Have you sat down with this thing and looked people up on LinkedIn? What are they doing? Where are they at? Because they might be in an organization or in a role that you'd be interested in trying to get your foot in the door with. And again, because you never know. One of the 2 guys that I served with that got me one of my jobs, he was my first NCOIC at my first unit back in 1998.
Oh, wow.
I hadn't seen the guy or served with the guy in 15 years, right? Aside from the mandatory yearly happy birthday message on Facebook. Didn't, but he, we had that rapport and he knew who I was and what I brought to the table. So over 15 years later, he knew I was looking for an opportunity. So when one popped up, he was like, "Hey, Keith, I know you'd be a perfect fit for this job." And yeah, by the way, wink, wink, I know the hiring manager. So I'm rambling. I need to kick it back over to you.
No, you're not actually. So I think that's so important that we forget that we know so many people already. And how many people do we know that were senior to us that are probably in those very influential positions after they transition that could get us extremely well connected? I mean, I don't know how it works in the federal sector, but yeah, 2 out of my 3 jobs that I had before I started my own business were because, well, one of them was because I knew somebody and they connected me with a hiring manager in the company that they were working in, and I got a job.
Yep.
The other one was simply because they had heard of me from another veteran, and they knew I was a warrant officer, and they wanted to hire I hate that people say this, but they wanted to hook up a mythical unicorn.
I was going to say they needed a guy to walk around 2 hours a day with a clipboard and a coffee cup and then disappear.
Coffee cup only for a couple hours of the day. It's water for the rest of it. By the way, this is a Bigfoot cup. It's kind of fun. Anyway,
nice.
But no, you're right. It's that guy. Whatever your journey is in the military, it doesn't matter if you were an E4, an E7, an E9, if you were an officer, warrant officer. It doesn't make any difference. We all have a unique leadership experience where we had to jump into the most uncomfortable things. We had no idea how to do them. And we have the saying baptism by fire, because you literally got, blessed while you were going into things going, I don't know what the hell to do next. Who do I talk to? What do I do? And you 9 times out of 10, as ugly as it may have been, you ended up successful doing these things.
Yeah.
And what a skill. And I can't say all, but most civilians don't get the unique opportunity to be thrown into situations like that. And then there's combat. I'm not even going to go into that. That's an entire other set of uncomfortable things that not every combat soldier actually had to go through, which civilians don't understand that as well. They think you go to Iraq and you're automatically this guy that goes and shoots bad guys, and that's not always true. But when you do, that's a unique experience too. We're not just these guys that are potentially going to go ham on somebody because of PTSD, which is what a lot of civilians think. No, we are these resilient people that once you get us to a job, we focus at a level that most people probably don't understand, and we do everything we can, borderline legal, maybe not, to make sure we get the stuff done.
Oh yeah, we like to rock the boat for sure.
Yes, rocking the boat is very, very fun. But that's leadership, right? Because if you're just going through the motions, you're not practicing true leadership.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Doing the uncomfortable things is definitely what it takes to make stuff happen.
Yeah.
So you're in the federal sector now. What are some things that you do to help veterans get jobs? I mean, I would imagine that a lot of people, well, I know for a fact, a lot of people try and fail when it comes to federal employment. What are some tips and tricks that you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
For the sake of time, I'll keep it fairly high level because I can definitely drill down on them, and that's a lot what I do, So again, anybody listening, hit me up on LinkedIn. We'll get you on my calendar. We'll drill down on this stuff. But really, there's 3 things, very high level overview, 3 things to get you a job in the federal sector. And here's the secret to all of it. It's no different in the private sector. It's really not, right? There are some differences and there's some nuances about the federal hiring process that tend to differ from the federal or from the private sector. But in the end, at the high level overview, it's all the same. So some of these, or all 3 of these, are going to probably sound extremely familiar. So the first thing is you got to tailor that resume, right? Now, I would argue you have to do the same thing in the private sector, but the federal sector, it's probably more important to a degree for a different reason. So again, but the concept is still there. The guideline is still tailor that resume. Show us that you can, on paper, that you can do this job pretty much blindfolded with your hands tied behind your back. People think, well, then if I can already do the job and my resume shows that, then what, as it's listed on USA Jobs, then you're looking for anybody to grow. What a lot of people don't realize is what's listed on USA Jobs is the next level down. Right. So if you're applying for a GS-12 position, what you're seeing on LinkedIn or on USA Jobs, that's GS-11 stuff. That's what GS-11s are doing. And that's what we're requiring you to show on your resume. Because when you come on, you're going to be doing above and beyond that. Right. So tailor that resume. Cannot stress that one enough. The second thing is, in 2 of the 3 things I'm going to say are both related to the resume. So the second thing is also to that resume, right? So after you've tailored that resume, make sure every action on that resume has a measured result tied to it. Right? Because tailoring your resume, all that's actually going to do is get you past HR, right? That's going to get you that referral notification we all talk about, the email saying you can refer to the hiring manager. Great, you tailored your resume. Hiring manager is not going to care at all about that tailored resume. Because here's why, right? As a hiring manager, I don't care about what you've done. What you've done is not what you bring to the table. It's not what you're bringing to the team if I hire you, right? But let me just say, so what you bring to the team or what you bring to the table is the results of all of those things you've done, right? But once you've tailored your resume, if there's anything missing, it's those results. Why? Because what's a job description? It's all action. It says the job requires you to do X, Y, and Z. So when you tailor your resume ends up saying, I've done X, Y, and Z. I don't care about X, Y, and Z as a hiring manager. I care about the results of those, of X, Y, and Z, right? So, but again, once we've tailored our resume, if there's anything missing, more often than not, it's those measured results, not just results. Because you can give me a result that tells me nothing, right? I need a measured result so I can measure the impact of what that outcome was. So that's the second thing, right? So those are the two things that are based on resumes. The third thing, we've already talked about it, networking, right? The average civilian, John Q. public, cannot network their way into a federal job. But most, there are some instances where it's not the case, but most veterans can, right? And a lot of us don't realize that, right? Again, they cram all this stuff and tap Soldier for Life, down our throat about, veterans preferences and stuff, and it gets jumbled up in our head, right? But there's things there that they probably didn't dive quite deep enough to make you realize that you can network your way into a federal job as a veteran a lot of the time. So with those other two things in play, because that resume still has to be rock solid, but then you throw networking in there as well, and somebody's willing to throw your name into that hiring manager's ear, that just gave you a humongous leg up on the competition. And again, at a high level overview, those are the three ingredients of the secret sauce. And again, no different than the private sector, just slight nuances.
So the resume, and this will be the last question because then we're probably gonna have to wrap it up. But
Okay.
so with the resume, if you've been out for a while and you've worked a number of jobs, which by the way, probably were not at the same level that you would have been serving, especially if you spent an entire career in the military. I've heard that it's the last job that matters most. Is it the same on a federal resume, or is every job description equally as important?
So I would say the last job mostly matter. So here's the thing: there's no the way to write a resume, private or federal sector. There's a million different A ways. Even if you use the USA Jobs Resume Builder, which again, if you hit me up offline, I'll tell you why I'm not a huge advocate for it. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I feel there's better ways to format our resumes. But all that to say, it's a way, right? So in my years of doing this and talking with hiring managers, even in the federal space, they tend to have the same mindset that the most recent jobs are going to be the most influential. Because again, that's also why we generally say don't go back more than 10 years, because if it's more than 10 years ago, it's a perished skill at that point. If you haven't done in the last 10 years, it's not really super relevant. Now, can you go back more than 10 years? I've seen it done. I've even tried to do it myself on a couple applications, in the past, but don't do it chronologically. If you're going to go over 10 years, then I encourage people to do the skills-based resume. The functional resume, I think, is what they kind of call it technically. That lets you maybe kind of play with some of this like stuff that's a little bit more than 10 years old. But yeah, as long as you're relevant, I mean, the chronological is great for within the last 10 years. And again, I've met hiring managers that say you can go 20 years back. They don't care as much. It's all based on the individual, but we as the applicants don't necessarily know that. Unless we've networked our way in, maybe we get some insight on that. Again, networking can be so incredibly powerful. But when you don't know, it's good to stick to the guidelines that I feel like what I've thrown out there. This is from years of talking to recruiters and hiring managers. I mean, hundreds at this point. Because every time I meet a new one, I'm like, so what's your take on resumes? What do you think about this? So,
Of course. Yeah.
There's exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, that's what I've found.
Okay. No, I think that's sound advice. And I hear different things all the time too. And I've gone through courses on federal resumes and the whole 9 yards. And even each instructor has their own opinion on the way you format it and the way it looks. And some people like the resume builder, some people don't. And so it's really, really difficult. Maybe having an insider networking, right? Having an insider at the organization that can say, hey, look, this is what we like to see the most.
Yeah,
would probably be better.
Yeah, and if you can get your name to that hiring manager's ear, they're going to be willing to overlook a lot of that stuff on your resume.
Okay.
The formatting and a lot of the content, because now they're hearing about you, right? And that's way more impactful than anything that the piece of paper says. Now, again, not discounting tailoring it. You got to do it. I'll tell you why in an offline conversation. But yeah, getting. So real quick, another thing. Sorry, I'm gonna ramble real quick. Okay. Why is networking so powerful? Right. I feel like we don't say that enough either. We don't talk about the why. Why are these statistics so high? Why is it 3 out of 4 or 70 to 85% ish, depending on which study you read? Why? Because as a hiring manager, my job is not to find the most qualified candidate. All right. And that's the misnomer that we seem to think that's the hiring manager's position. It's not my job, because everybody, especially in the federal government, everybody that hits my desk, if I'm a hiring manager, they can do this job blindfold with their hands tied behind their back. They're all most qualified, right? My job is to find the best fit for my team, the best fit for my organization, the best fit for the culture that we're trying to establish and or maintain. And that's really hard to do from a stack of papers. I'm gambling on pieces of paper as to who might be a good fit, but therein lies why if somebody who has clout with me, somebody who has relationship with me, somebody who's a proven fit for our culture already, if they come to me with your name in their mouth, stands to fit that you'd be a good fit too. And the gambling that I'm doing on these pieces of paper, you just became a safer bet. And that's why it launches you to the top. Because now, again, not all hiring managers get what I just said, but I would argue the good ones do. The ones that I want to go work for, they realize that that's their job, is to just find the best fit. And job interviews, that's kind of what they are. Yeah, we're still going to ask you questions about your resume and your work experience, but in the back of our minds, we're just asking, is this somebody I want to work with? And, you know, it's kind of like SF selection, right? At the very end, you go through all that stuff, you're qualified, but do I actually want to work with this guy or gal? So yeah, therein lies the why behind all that.
No, that's sound. That makes perfect sense. And whether the hiring manager understands that concept or not, it doesn't matter, because when you hear somebody rather than flip through all the names, it's gonna stick out more than
Exactly.
just dig. You, dude, if anybody who's listening has ever had to just sift around on a report or through a stack of papers or a spreadsheet or whatever the case may be, things start getting lost.
Yeah.
But if you hear something first, like for example, I was a mobility warrant officer. I know I got to wrap this up, but I was a mobility warrant officer, so I did deployment stuff. So honestly, most times I had an entire spreadsheet full of nomenclatures, and that's what I dealt with: height, weight, dimensions, metric tons. That's it. And then by air, people too. But you know, really, when it comes to that, I'm just going through and making sure everything is right. But if somebody mentions, hey, how many whatevers are going to be going on this deployment? Well, then now all of a sudden, all of these whatevers are jumping out on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
So it's the same concept, in my opinion. So that's sound advice, Keith.
Yep. Yeah. No, and you hit the nail on the head as well. So yeah. I could keep going. Maybe you can have me back on again one day. I know we're at time, but yeah,
we are at time.
Awesome.
Yeah, no. I really enjoyed this, Keith, and thank you for being willing to come on and be a guest on here. And normally I ask for the piece of advice that most people would like to share most, but I think you probably shared most of that already.
I had quite a few. I won't over inundate everybody even more. So.
Yes. Now, if you're listening, please, I see we have a few watchers on right now, viewers. Don't be afraid to participate, especially if you're one that continuously comes on these things. Please participate. The comments mean something. Interactivity on these things are very, very important. Now, in addition to that, please like these videos so that the algorithm increases and more people see them. Subscribe if you see this on my YouTube channel. But the most important thing always, whether you're watching now or later, is to put that comment below so that we can keep these conversations going. And, you know, these great people like Keith want to keep on coming on my show. Thank you again, Keith. I feel blessed that you were willing to come on. And yeah, everyone else, we'll see you next time.
Have a good one.